So hello and welcome to Ideas, AILA's new program exploring inclusivity, diversity, equity, and allyship in STEAM. Yes, we love our acronyms just like anyone else. If this is your first time attending an AILA event, welcome. And if you're returning, it's great to have you back. AILA is a nonprofit based in Los Angeles with a global reach. Our mission is to accelerate innovation for social good and develop the greater Los Angeles region into a responsible AI ecosystem. Since 2016, we have been convening a cross-disciplinary group of academic and industry experts in the general public to explore the impacts AI, machine learning, and other frontier technologies have on our personal and professional lives. Pre-COVID, we were meeting 3 times a month in person with crowds of 100 to 400 people. Yes, AILA events are pretty popular, and we hope to be able to meet in person this fall for our Life Summit focusing on AI applications and research in healthcare and life sciences. The goal of our Ideas program is to be the connective tissue between all of our programs, because if we truly want to build responsible AI, then we as humans need to have these difficult conversations, which will generate new ideas for collaboration that'll lead to new innovations that'll benefit us all. We want today to be a safe space for authentic self-expression and a place where all are welcome, seen, and heard. There's so much going on in the world today. So I'd like to take a moment right now, a moment of silence, to reflect on those who are no longer with us. Thank you. Now, today wouldn't be possible without our amazing team and our sponsors, Microsoft, Google, USC Marshall Lloyd Gray Center, and Pledge LA. I'd like to give special thanks to Rachel Victor at Apollo, who developed all of the content for our 2 breakout sessions, and with advisement and collaboration from Davina Walter at USC Iveen and Young Academy, and Tracy Dean Ponder from BSTEM Project, who you'll get to meet after our keynote. Shout outs to Jorge Rafael for designing a beautiful flyer, Jay Valesco for social media support, Lynette Coste for production, Anastasia Kopteva for pre-planning and gifts, and Shabani Ray for moderation and promotion. Also, this all wouldn't be possible without our 2 champions at Google and Microsoft, E. Pasalti and Maria Alvarez. So thank you for believing in us and continuing to support the AILA community. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Gennai, Head of Responsible Innovation at Google, who will be kicking off AILA's first Ideas with a keynote. Jen?
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction, Todd. As mentioned, I'm Gennai. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the founder and director of the Responsible Innovation team at Google. The Responsible Innovation team is responsible for putting Google's AI principles into practice. These are essentially the ethical constitution for how Google develops and deploys AI technologies. My team runs ethics and issue spotting trainings. We review and approve products and commercial deals prior to their launch, and we communicate shared learnings and challenges to help advance ethical thinking across the company, which is now about 120,000 people. At Google, this ethical charter of building responsible AI is informed and executed by about 200 people across Google, mostly across our research organization and the global affairs organization. Me and my team sit in global affairs and are in charge of defining the policies and putting these ethical AI principles into operational practice every day, while the research org are responsible for foundational research, developing technical solutions, and providing metrics and guidelines of how to adopt into the engineering and product best practices. Although we have many different teams working on responsible and ethical AI with different cultures, different accountable executives, and different policies and practices, some of which work and some of which have not, and you'll obviously be talking about that later today, we do work together day to day to try and advance the technology and understanding around responsible AI. So today, I won't be speaking as much from the Google perspective, but from my own experience. I have worked at Google for over 14 years. I've led about 6 different teams, mostly in the user research, the user experience area, and now in the ethical user impact area. So I'll be sharing some of my learnings from across that time, but also some of my failures and challenges. I think it's okay to talk about things that you've made mistakes in, because we will make mistakes. When we're trying to be good allies, when we're trying to be anti-racist, we will make mistakes. The point is, though, to keep trying, to keep educating yourself and getting better day to day. It's about constant learning. So I hope today I'll share a little bit of some of those learnings I found useful so you can try and avoid some of the missteps along the way. But as it's a Friday and I know that the breakouts are going to be what's really engaging, I'm going to try and ensure that you know and follow along with what I'll cover. I'll be focusing on 3 main sections. Understanding, which will focus on definitions and kind of educational opportunity. Prioritizing, why are these concepts important? And then acting, what are some tips that you can take away today to make some change? And I do know in those breakouts and discussions later, you have some really meaty topics to get through. And I have to say, I'm especially proud you'll be hearing from the amazing X in one of them. They used to be on my team and now are a product manager in the research organization. I always learn a lot from them and I'm confident you will too. So let's get back to what I'll cover. Understanding, prioritizing, and acting on the idea concepts. So in understanding, I'll give some brief definitions and descriptions of the main concepts of IDEA: inclusivity, diversity, equity, and allyship, not just day-to-day, but in the workplace. When talking about prioritizing, I'll talk about why IDEA is important in general, but in particular when building successful teams and developing responsible AI. And thirdly, during the acting section, I'll give tips and tricks on what you can do right now, today, but also in your workplace. So let's get started. That first section of understanding. Language is very important. It underlines our ability to tackle complex topics and builds empathy and understanding. I believe in your handout, or at least in preparation, you were asked to think about the definitions of some of our key terms today: inclusivity, diversity, equity, allyship, and then responsible and representative AI. There's not one single definition of any of these, and you or your workplace may have very specific definitions that work for you. But I'll outline some of the ways I found them helpful to understand, which hopefully resonate with some of those definitions that you may already have. So firstly, inclusivity. Inclusivity, for me at least, means including many different types of people. It means taking deliberate steps to ensure everyone feels welcome, that they can participate, they have access to opportunities and resources. At work, we should seek to embrace diversity and create the conditions for everyone to thrive, not just assume that they will. In a company, this means building an environment where every employee feels welcomed, respected, supported, and valued. A corporate study found that talented white employees enter a fast track on the corporate ladder, arriving in middle management well before their peers, while talented Black, Hispanic, or Latinx professionals broke through much later. Effective mentorship and sponsorship were critical for retention and executive level development of Black, Hispanic, and Latinx employees. So this leads me into sharing an inclusion failure of mine, one of many, but just one that I'll share so far. I messed up with inclusion almost right away when I first became a manager. I made some stupid assumptions about the fact that I built a diverse team, that then they'd simply feel welcome and will feel supported. I treated every member of my team the same and expected that that would lead to equally good outcomes for everyone. That was not true. I got some feedback that a couple of members of my team didn't feel they belonged because there was no one who looked like them in the broader org or our management team. It was a wake-up call for me. First, I shouldn't have had to wait to be told what was missing. It was on me to ensure I was building an environment that made people feel they belong. It's a myth that you're not unfair if you treat everyone the same. There are groups that have been marginalized and excluded because of historic systems and structures that were intentionally designed to favor one group over another. So you need to account for that and mitigate against it. Second, it challenged me to identify mentoring and sponsorship opportunities for my team members with people who looked more like them and were in senior positions across the company. Thirdly, it pushed me to participate more in my organization's own diversity and inclusion efforts, which could more focus on the structural changes that are required, not just on the individuals. So to build more accountability into our leadership structures around hiring, retention, and growth within our organization. So from inclusivity, I'll go to the definition of diversity. Diversity is the mix and variety of demographics, lived experiences, expertise, skills, and backgrounds of different types of people. Specifically ensuring that we are including people from traditionally underrepresented or historically marginalized backgrounds. This doesn't happen on single dimensions. You have to think about intersectionality too. I identify myself as a woman, but also as an Irish woman, but also as an immigrant to the US. So there's many different types of ways of thinking about intersectionality. So you have to think about not just about trans women, but Black trans women, not just about able-bodied girls, but girls with disabilities, both visible and invisible. In the workplace, it also means ensuring that your workforce reflects your user base. Another personal anecdote is when I interviewed for Google, I felt really proud that I made it past the interviews. I knew the hiring bar was super high, and I felt as a woman and an Irish person, I'd proven myself. I'd reached this very high bar. I felt I didn't have the same history of being supported in computer science or math that I knew my brothers and my male friends had. And Irish people suffer from historical stereotypes, mostly from the English around being lazy, stupid, drunk all the time. So I felt I overcome these stereotypes and felt I'd kind of won getting into this big company. And I wanted to change the world for the better. And I knew that a small Irish company wouldn't allow me that opportunity. I felt like the men I must have been interviewing with had a much better setup for success in those interviews. So I really felt proud of myself when I got in there. However, I was also ignorant of the right language at the time. Really, I was talking about privilege and power, and I felt I had less power when conducting those interviews. But once I was in Google, it didn't take me long to realize that my starting point as a white woman was still far ahead from a privilege and power perspective than many of my brown and Black colleagues. They had also met the same high Google bar, but had started from even further away from that bar due to systemic societal racism. Since then, I've tried to be more deliberate and aware of the different paths to hiring for Google. So I try and take more specific steps. For example, attending things like the Black Data Science Conference in New Orleans, or speaking at the Hidden Genius Project in Oakland. We as managers have to be more deliberate about recognizing how to build more diverse channels to build that diversity into our workforce. It also made me realize that being a victim of prejudice, or even a perceived victim of prejudice, does not inoculate me to other prejudices. So we all have to pay attention. Third definition is equity. Equity here, for me, again, means fairness in outputs or impacts, not just on the input side and processes, but ensuring that the outcomes are fair and equitable. People often think equity is the same as equality. I like a metaphor by the mayor of Minneapolis, Betsy Hodges, former mayor of Minneapolis, which can help understand the difference. She said, equality is everybody getting a pair of shoes. Equity means everybody gets a shoe that fits. In the workplace, it means fairness in how you're distributing resources and opportunities, but also ensuring and not just assuming that they will lead to fair and just outcomes. Second last definition is our allyship one. Allyship involves the active steps to support and amplify the voice of members of marginalized groups in ways that they cannot do alone. In the workplace, this can involve many things, from being an active mentor or sponsor to those from historically marginalized communities, to managers of managers setting specific goals in hiring and growth for their teams to ensure fairness and equity of opportunity and outcomes for underrepresented populations. However, back to the point about language being very important, using the title of ally can also come across as othering. So I always state both the groups I'm a member of and support, as well as those that I'm a member of, more of a mentor and a sponsor of, to ensure that it doesn't look like that I'm othering others. So for example, I would say I'm an ally of women, Black people, LGBTQ. I want to say I'm a champion advocate of all of these groups, not that I'm outside or exclusionary of them. And so finally, my last definition before we get into the importance is, why are these important to concepts of responsible and representative AI? What does responsible and representative AI mean? I've talked about my team, but that's only one definition. So for us, it means taking deliberate steps to ensure that the advanced technologies that we develop and deploy lead to a positive impact on individuals and society more broadly. It means that our AI is built with and for everyone. We can't just assume noble goals and good intent prevent or solve ethical issues. Instead, we need to deliberately build teams and build structures that hold us accountable to more ethical outcomes, which for us, the ethical outcomes in Google will be defined as our AI principles, which I discussed earlier. So then next section is on prioritize. So with that common understanding of inclusivity, diversity, equity, and allyship, why are they important? Among other things, for individuals in society, it means that they feel more included. Products work better for everyone, and educational and economic opportunities will be more equitable and just. And for your employees and businesses, these better outcomes range from increased productivity, increased creativity to problem solving, increased employee well-being, retention, and engagement. Specific to my work, the impact and importance of inclusivity, diversity, equity, and allyship in teams and building responsible AI mean to me that it means when me and my team are dealing with the impact of Google's research and technology in the world, we have a diversity of lived experience informing how to think about that impact. We need to ensure that we're thinking about how different groups may be impacted differently in the products and how they may be experiencing less positive impacts of those products than others. It also means that me and my team are aware that when we're defining processes, that we may not be considering different people's perspectives and expertise. So it challenges us to think about ways to increase input and think more globally and comprehensively about our topics. And then thirdly, as a manager, it means that me and my managers are more deliberate and accountable to our goals in inclusivity, diversity, and equity, in hiring, retention, belonging, and growth. So our team members can feel welcome, valued, and supported. This is important to ensure that we increase our employee well-being, which increases their engagement and retention, reduces our attrition, and builds a stronger, more psychologically safe team. However, understanding the importance of these efforts is obviously not sufficient. It may lead you to setting good intentions, but as the saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. As you may have guessed, I failed here too, many times. In one instance, I had specific intentions that I was a great collaborator and partner trying to do the right thing with someone me and my team were going to work with. I felt I was meeting their needs, and I was about how to engage, about setting meetings, sharing information, but that's not how it was received. I had said hurtful things. My partner felt I had attacked them. Immediately, I felt shocked. I felt defensive. That's not me. That's not what I meant. You misunderstood me. Right, but none of that mattered. I made someone else feel bad and unsafe. Didn't matter what I intended, I'd really messed up. I apologized, I tried to make amends, but it was a broken relationship from there. This isn't meant to scare you away from trying, but just being honest that when I say you have to keep going, you'll make mistakes, you just have to keep educating yourself, and you don't get to rewrite history. You can't fix all of your errors. You just have to keep getting better day after day. That involves education. It involves some uncomfortable conversations. It involves soliciting feedback, but you can do it and you can hold yourself better to be improved day after day. But it never ends, and it's definitely a journey. The final topic that I'll try and cover in the interest of time is the application. I've tried to share a couple of the tips that I've learned over time, mostly from our failures. My failures have definitely been my biggest learning opportunities. But I'll try and summarize some of these quickly in terms of what you can apply today, and then allow you to obviously move on to the other amazing speakers in your breakouts. So for being a good ally, the most basic recommendation is you have to educate yourself. You cannot burden already historically marginalized and underrepresented people to educate you. You have to do the hard work. Take trainings, read lectures, read research, watch videos of people sharing their lived experiences, especially those different than your own. Then make a plan. Hold yourself accountable to specific change. Hold yourself accountable to specific improvements. And if you're a manager or a manager of managers, make sure you're holding them accountable too. And then day to day, call out microaggressions when you see them. The other big topic I was just going to summarize at the end is building inclusion into responsible AI development. This is really dependent on advancing your understanding and awareness of allyship and what's required there. So for us, and for some of the learnings as I've built a number of different teams, is to hire diverse teams, ensuring that you're taking deliberate steps. It can sound obvious, but your hiring bar does not change, but how big and broad your candidate pool is can change. And that requires some new ways of connecting, expanding your network, recruiting via non-traditional channels, using language that doesn't imply that you're looking for a particular type of person, focusing mostly on the skills. So being more conscious in your definition of the roles and ensuring that that pool is large. It generally also means, against maybe a technology industry ethos, is not to just hire quickly, is to make sure that you're hiring correctly and making sure that you're opening up those opportunities for more people. Secondly, once you've hired those people, as I shared above that I wasn't great at the start, is ensuring those people know that they belong. Provide people with diverse mentoring and sponsorship opportunities. Make sure everyone takes unconscious bias training, that your managers actively work to build psychological safety on your team. And also check in with people. Make sure that they do feel belong. Don't make assumptions. It's not up to you to say someone belongs, it's up to them to say that they belong. Next, you can still never truly hire a representative team. No matter how many steps you take, we have a big wide world out there. We cannot possibly hire everyone who looks like every one of our users. So how do you think about expanding that knowledge, expanding where you get input from? For us internally, we leverage our employee resource groups, the ERGs. These are people who self-identify as being from different backgrounds. We leverage them for stress testing some of our cases that we review, some of the processes we're defining, and some of our decision-making frameworks. But we want to make sure it's a positive feedback loop. To my previous point, it's not about burdening other people. It's about making sure there's a positive feedback loop of value, of rewards, of recognition, but also change and impact. Next, even with those ERG members, we can't pretend that they can speak for their whole community. So expanding into the broader external world, engaging with community groups, engaging with experts and scholars in these areas can help expand that area of knowledge. And then finally, conducting inclusive user testing, ensuring that you're creating safe spaces for users of many different identities to stress test products and technologies to ensure it works for them. Okay, my time is coming to a close. I hope you feel a little bit more confident about how you can understand, prioritize, and act on ensuring inclusivity, diversity, equity, and allyship in your day-to-day. It won't be easy, but it is necessary. So now I'm honored to introduce Tracy Dean Ponder, founder and executive director of BSTEM Project. BSTEM is a nonprofit organization whose primary goal is to provide young girls and women with unique educational and professional development program opportunities around business and technology. BSTEM's secondary goal is to offer an extension of interactive and real-world programs for youth and young adults, both boys and girls, in collaboration with educational institutions and youth-based organizations nationally. All programs are free, as well as instructed and mentored by professionals across all industries and job sectors. The organization is dedicated to exploring ways to cultivate transferable skill sets and exposing emerging talent to new and exciting fields. Please join me in welcoming Tracy.
Thank you so much, Jen. I'm really happy to be a part of this event. It's really exciting, it's important, it's so vital. And what we do at BSTEM Project is really about cultivating talent. And sometimes when you talk about human resources, you're saying a lot of times, where can you find the talent? Where is the talent? Well, it also starts with cultivating the talent as young as middle school and high school and college, and having opportunities, educational and professional development opportunities, equitable access to things that are really important that will help young people be prepared and have the skill set and the knowledge to even pursue these careers that will impact AI. So that's very important. And I love what Jen said. I mean, all of the things she talked about, building diverse channels, qualifications, equity versus equality, and allyship. And I like to say that when you talk about systems or systematic racism, a lot of times we tend to put the systems as something that's this kind of enigmatic thing that's out in the world that we're all trying to kind of conquer and to do something about. But as we go further in this conversation today, what we hope that you start to think about is how you as an individual plays a role, because there's nothing that exists without the people that are within the system, and we're the people that make it work or not work, or if it's flawed, if we can make it better. And so we have to take ownership. And I like what Jen said, because I think a lot of it was about personal ownership and the decisions that she made and some of the challenges and things that didn't work out and relationships that were broken. But you have to be bold enough to take those steps, and it's going to happen. But that you just get it together again, and you just keep going, because you have to be determined to see the change. And so what we want to do is really talk about a lot of the things that Jen mentioned in her talk, which was so rich with a lot of just insight that I believe that a lot of people are just learning about and talking about and being educated. So I'm hopeful about that, because you say, okay, now that you know, what are the actions? And again, what are the priorities, and how are you going to walk it out and live it out into the world? So the two things that we really want to talk about is the challenges of AI and creating AI that's equitable. And again, the systems in which we are creating AI, is it supporting these creative technologies? And so what I would love for you to do, there is a handout, and you would see that on the right. So please be sure to click that, and it will help you guide you around a lot of the things that we're discussing today. And I don't know if many of you are familiar with Dr. Gabrew's experience. And if you're not, please look at that, take a look and dig in a little deeper, but how diversity and inclusion within the industry into equitable AI, and how we create that, and what her experience was, and how that experience needs to be a catalyst to kind of to transform a lot of ways in which we're thinking about how we treat our, those of color, those that we work with, allyship, how do we support them, and continue to understand how can we be better individually and collectively as an organization. So as you kind of look at that information, also what we want to do is have a couple of polls to kind of get you going and thinking about where you stand, what do you think, or what have you experienced when it comes to these issues? And then we'll be able to break it down and break out into smaller groups and talk about that. And the whole idea is that, to have a conversation, to dig deeper, but to have a conversation where we can all kind of be respectful and really understand that all of these situations can be very, touchy, heartfelt. And a lot of times we're kind of scared and nervous of what to say, what not to say, how do I move forward, what do I do? But I think that that's a part of it. And so if we can kind of be respectful and mindful and give grace to us as we do that, because if we don't have honest dialogue and conversation, nothing works, nothing can happen, there can be no solutions. And so we really want to have honest dialogue, intimate dialogue, that hopefully we can walk away with something today, even if it's one thing that makes us better and that we can implement and put into action in our lives. And so we're going to go to the first poll of questions. And if you look on the right, you should be able to see in the chat the polls. And the first questions are: one, I have personally dealt with institutional inequity. 2, I have noticed institutional inequity in my school or in my workplace. 3, I am aware of the institutional inequity in my industry at large. And 4, I have spoken up about issues of institutional inequity. And lastly, 5, I don't think institutional inequity has been a part of my life. So it'd be great if you start to answer some of those questions. We're still going, we're going. Give you a couple more minutes. Again, I have personally dealt with institutional racism. I have noticed institutional inequity in my school or workplace. I am aware of the institutional inequity in my industry at large. I have spoken up about issues of institutional inequity, and I don't think institutional inequity has been a part of my life. Okay, great, great. Thank you. All right, I'm just going to just right now just move on a little bit. For the first question, we have about 33.3%. I have personally dealt with institutional inequity. We have about 10% for the second. I have noticed institutional inequity in my school or workplace. 26.7, I am aware of the institutional inequity in my industry at large. 21%, I have spoken up about issues of institutional inequity. And then 6%, 6.3, I don't think institutional inequity has been a part of my life. Very interesting. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So what that is helping us doing is we're going to think about it and have discussions around, where you fall here, thinking about where you are and what things have happened that have impacted you or not impacted you, and why you may have think that you might not see it, but maybe if you think a little bit further after a discussion, you might say, oh, I have. We're going to do one more poll. Our second poll is going to be around several questions. One is, am I just beginning to learn more about diversity and inclusion? So are you just beginning to learn more? The second one is going to be, I have some familiarity with issues of diversity and inclusion, and I'm passionate about growing my knowledge. Third, allies. I currently am active in allyship and want to share and learn best practices. Seeking community. I personally deal with institutional inequality within the tech industry and want to find a community. And lastly, I deal with institutional inequality with the tech industry and want to discuss ways to bring about change. So that is, and again, you will be able to find the polls in the same area. So please start on the right, clicking away. And what this is going to do, it's going to be able to help us understand what areas in the groups that you'll be able to dialogue with, because we don't want you somewhere where you feel like, well, maybe I don't know that much about it, and maybe that's not where I find myself. So please start to weigh in on the polls, again, on your right. Thank you. This is great. Give you one more minute. And what we're going to do is when we break out into our sessions, you're going to find your sessions on the left. It'll say sessions, and you'll see where you fall, and then you'll select a session. And what we're going to do in the session, just so you'll have a heads up, and I'm sure each of the facilitators and the moderators will let you know, there's a Miro or Miro, it's called, and you would want to kind of go to that board, click the link, and what we're going to do is kind of just do some brainstorming. It's very easy. Everything is set up, and just begin to have you thinking and collaborating and brainstorming with those in your group around each of these topics. And so we hope that it'll really kind of get you to talking about it, thinking about it, and maybe even just more informative for you on how you can be more active and be more of an ally or a change maker. And so just to kind of wrap this poll, I am just beginning. There's about 8% of people who are just beginning to learn more about diversity and inclusion. Great. Welcome. 30%, I have some familiarity with issues of diversity and inclusion, and I'm passionate about it. About 19%, I'm currently allyship, active in allyship, and want to share and learn best practices. And 8% seeking community. I personally deal with institutional inequality within the tech industry and want to change. And change makers, I deal with institutional inequality within the tech industry, and I want to discuss ways to see change. So thank you so much. This is awesome. So what we're going to do now is move into our sessions. And again, if you look on your left, you would see the session button, and you'll be able to select based on where you fall, and looking forward to having conversations. Thank you. Have fun, be respectful, be open, give grace, and hopefully you get something really rich out of it. Thank you.